The planet of Vera was dying. Smoke rose from the cities, drifting like dark clouds across the sky. The Dravari Empire had come without mercy, burning fields, tearing down homes, and leaving nothing but silence in their path. For months, the people of Vera had fought to defend their land, but every battle ended the same way. The Dravari were too many, their machines too strong, their hunger for conquest without end. Commander Loran stood on the balcony of the last great hall in the capital city. His eyes were fixed on the horizon where fire burned in the distance. The council had gathered inside, arguing, shouting, and begging for answers, but Loran knew the truth. There were no answers left. Their fleets were gone, their armies broken, and their allies silent. He clenched his fists, knowing the enemy would be here soon, and when they came, Vera would fall. Inside the hall, voices rose higher. Some demanded surrender, saying it was better to live as slaves than to die as ashes. Others demanded to fight to the very end, to give their lives for freedom no matter how hopeless. The words filled the room, but none gave comfort. Everyone knew the Dravari had already won. In a small corner of the city, far from the council chambers, a young woman named Mara sat with her younger brother Kalen. They lived in a broken shelter, the roof patched with metal scraps, the walls cracked from nearby blasts. Mara held Kalen close as the boy asked questions she could not answer. "Will they come tonight? Will the soldiers find us?" he whispered. Mara stroked his hair and said, "Not tonight. Not while I am here." She did not believe her own words, but she would not let him see her fear. She had promised their mother before she died that she would keep Kalen safe. But how could anyone be safe when the world itself was ending? Outside, the sound of explosions rumbled through the streets. The last defense lines were collapsing. Soldiers in battered armor dragged themselves from one post to another, carrying rifles that barely worked and standing against machines that towered over them. Even the bravest of them fought with tired hearts, for they had lost friends, families, and entire cities. No victory song filled the air. Only the cries of the wounded and the silence of the fallen. The Dravari were merciless in their cruelty. Every city they took was turned into a place of chains. Men and women were forced into labor. Children separated from their parents and entire cultures crushed. They broadcast their threats across the airwaves, telling the people of Vera that resistance was useless, that their fate was already sealed. Each message was filled with laughter, as if the suffering of others was a game to them. Commander Loran returned to the council chamber after staring into the fire-lit horizon. His voice cut through the noise. "We have one choice left. We can surrender tomorrow, or we can fight and fall by tomorrow night." His words froze the room. Some lowered their heads. Others clenched their jaws. No one dared to ask for miracles anymore. Yet in the silence that followed, an old councilwoman stood. Her face was lined with age and her eyes heavy with sadness, but her voice carried strength. "We do not surrender. We are Vera. If we must fall, then we fall standing." For a moment, the hall grew still. No one cheered, no one smiled, but a small spark of pride stirred in their hearts. Even if the end was near, they would meet it with dignity. That night, Mara and Kalen sat by a small lamp in their shelter. Kalen tried to sleep, but fear kept him awake. "What if no one comes for us?" he asked. Mara hugged him and whispered, "Then we will take care of each other." She stared at the lamp's flickering light, wondering if he would ever see a day without fear. She wanted to believe in something, anything. But the sky outside carried only the glow of war. All across the planet, families huddled together. Some prayed to the old gods of Vera, begging for a miracle. Others simply sat in silence, waiting for the end. The sound of distant explosions became as common as the wind. Each blast told them the Dravari were closer. Each fire in the distance told them another part of their world was gone. In the command post near the northern wall, soldiers gathered around tired maps. They knew the enemy would strike in the morning. The commanders spoke of holding the line, but the soldiers could see the fear in their eyes. They passed around small rations, shared old stories, and sat in silence when the weight of reality pressed too hard. Some wrote letters they would never send. Others stared into the dark sky, wondering what it would feel like when the end finally came. For the first time in many nights, the sky was clear enough to see the stars. Mara looked at them as she held her brother. The stars had always given her comfort, a reminder that the universe was vast, that life existed beyond their small world. But tonight they felt distant, cold, and empty. She wondered if anyone out there even knew Vera was dying, or if the universe would move on, forgetting them as dust. In the deep hours of the night, the communications tower picked up a strange signal. At first, the operators thought it was another Dravari broadcast meant to crush morale, but the sound was different. Steady, structured, carrying a pattern they did not recognize. The signal repeated again and again, like a voice knocking on a closed door. The operator called for Commander Loran. Together they listened, puzzled by the rhythm of the sound. It was not Varen, and it was not Dravari. It was something entirely new. They tried to decode it, but the machines could not understand. Still the signal continued, as if someone was trying to speak across the stars. Word spread quickly through the halls of the command post. Some dismissed it as nothing. Others dared to hope it meant help. Commander Loran remained silent, but inside, a part of him that had been buried in despair began to stir. If there was another voice out there, perhaps Vera was not alone. That night Mara dreamed of a sky filled with light, not fire, not destruction, but ships arriving like falling stars. She dreamed of soldiers she had never seen, voices she had never heard, and a promise that the end was not yet written. When she woke, the sound of explosions returned and the dream faded. But for the first time, she told Kalen, maybe someone will come. The boy looked at her with wide eyes. Do you believe that? He asked. Mara hesitated. Then she nodded. Yes, I believe. Outside, beyond the smoke-filled skies, the strange signal continued to echo across the dark. The sky over Vera cracked open that morning. From the distant stars, enormous shapes appeared, shining against the smoke and fire of the battlefield. The people of Vera watched in disbelief as massive vessels moved with a speed and grace that the Dravari had never shown. Commander Loran felt a shiver run down his spine. His instincts told him that these were not Dravari reinforcements. They were something else entirely. The first wave of the ships descended, and strange metallic figures moved from their shadows. The humans had arrived. Unlike the alien machines of the Dravari, these soldiers were smaller, more organized, and entirely focused. Captain Daniel Brooks led the first squads onto the scorched soil of Vera. His boots touched the ground with quiet determination, and his eyes scanned the horizon for danger. Beside him was Sergeant Laura Mitchell, who coordinated the landing with calm authority. Their soldiers followed without hesitation, trained to act as one, and their presence alone sent a ripple of shock through the Varen defenders. The Dravari, confident in their victory, had not expected resistance like this. They scrambled to intercept the newcomers, unleashing wave after wave of mechanical soldiers. But the humans moved with precision. Their weapons fired in patterns unknown to the Varens, piercing through the alien machines with surgical skill. Explosions tore through enemy ranks, and the sound of battle was different now, not one of despair but of hope. Private Jason Carter was among the first on the ground. He ran through the streets, guiding civilians to safety while dodging falling debris and enemy fire. His courage inspired the Varens around him. Mara watched from her hiding spot as humans moved fearlessly through the chaos, protecting families, carrying the wounded, and refusing to retreat even when danger surrounded them. She whispered to her brother Kalen, "They are not like us. They do not run. They fight for us." Commander Loran approached Captain Brooks as the humans set up their first command post. "Who are you?" he asked, still unsure if this was another trick. Brooks looked at him steadily. "We are human. We fight so the innocent do not die. We do not ask for reward or thanks. We are here to help." Loran felt a mix of relief and disbelief. After months of despair, someone had finally come. The humans worked quickly. They built temporary defenses, repaired broken weapons, and organized the Varen soldiers into units that could actually fight. Sergeant Mitchell led a group of young Varens through their first coordinated mission. They cleared debris, secured barricades, and even pushed back Dravari scouts who had been terrorizing the city. The Varens were amazed. They had not seen strategy like this, not in years. For the first time, they felt that they might survive. Meanwhile, the Dravari watched from orbit, confused and angry. Their scanners picked up the new arrivals and tried to understand them. But the humans did not behave as they expected. They did not fear, they did not panic, and they did not flee. The Dravari were used to breaking worlds by showing force and fear, but these humans fought with a discipline and courage that made their weapons less effective. Every attack the Dravari launched was met with a counter that tore through their lines, and slowly, their confidence began to waver. Mara and Kalen joined a small group of Vayrens who had been fighting in the outskirts. The humans moved with them, guiding them, giving orders, and fighting alongside them. Mara had never felt so safe and yet so amazed. She had grown up hearing stories of humans from old transmissions, stories of bravery and cunning, but she never thought she would see them with her own eyes. She watched Jason Carter shield a group of children from a collapsing building. She saw the calm courage of Sergeant Mitchell as she directed people through the chaos. It was almost unreal. By midday, the humans had turned the tide. Small battles that would have been losses became victories. Dravari patrols were defeated, supplies captured, and the streets of the city became safer for civilians. The Vayrens, who had lost hope, began to fight with renewed energy. Commander Loran coordinated with Captain Brooks, learning new tactics and forming strategies that would have been impossible without the humans. Each victory, small as it was, lifted the spirits of everyone on the planet. Captain Brooks took Mara and her brother to see the Human Command Center. It was a large tent filled with maps, communication devices, and soldiers moving with efficiency. He explained that humans had fought in many worlds and knew how to survive against overwhelming odds. "We have learned to work together, trust each other, and never give up," he said. "Those are the things that win battles." Mara nodded, understanding for the first time that courage was not just about fighting. It was about believing that survival was possible. The Dravari attempted a counterattack, sending their elite soldiers to crush the human forces. But the humans were ready. They set traps, coordinated ambushes, and used the terrain to their advantage. Private Carter led a small team to flank the enemy, while Sergeant Mitchell guided a group of Vayren fighters to hold the main street. Explosions shook the ground, but the humans did not falter. Every move was precise, every action purposeful. The Dravari were stunned. They had never faced an enemy that could think, adapt, and fight with such unity. As the sun began to set, the humans had reclaimed a significant part of the city. Mara and Kalen watched the aftermath, seeing the streets cleared, civilians safe, and the Dravari retreating for the first time. For the first time in months, Mara felt hope swell in her chest. Kalen looked at her and said, "They are saving us." Mara nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes, Kalen, they are saving us." Commander Loran met with Captain Brooks in the evening. "I have fought many battles, but I have never seen soldiers like yours," he said quietly. Brooks smiled. "We are human. We fight for each other. We fight for those who cannot fight. That is all we know." Loran felt a deep respect for these beings who had come from across the stars to save a planet that no one else cared about. That night, as the city rested, the humans worked tirelessly. They repaired walls, tended to the wounded, and planned for the next attack. Mara sat with Kalen, listening to the distant hum of human activity. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where they might survive, where the Dravari could be defeated, and where life on Vayra could begin again. Outside, the stars shone with a new light, reflecting the arrival of the humans. Their presence had changed everything. The people of Vayra had thought all hope was lost, but now, for the first time in a long while, they believed in a tomorrow that could be theirs. The human soldiers had landed, and with them they brought courage, strategy, and the promise that no one would have to face the Dravari alone. The Dravari had never faced an enemy like this before. Their fleets had burned worlds with ease, crushing all who stood against them. Yet here, on Vayra, they found themselves struggling against a force that refused to yield. The humans had arrived, and with them came a kind of war the Dravari did not understand. Captain Daniel Brooks stood at the edge of the ruined wall, scanning the battlefield with sharp eyes. His armor was marked with dust and scorch marks, but his spirit was unbroken. Around him, human soldiers moved quickly, checking their weapons, repairing their gear, and preparing for the next wave. They did not act like men who were about to lose. They acted like men who knew they would win. Beside him, Sergeant Laura Mitchell gave orders with calm precision. Her voice carried across the defensive lines, steady and clear, bringing order where chaos had threatened. She directed the placement of heavy guns, oversaw the construction of barricades, and made sure the Vayren militia understood the plan. The alien defenders listened to her with respect, for she carried herself with a confidence they had not seen in many months. The Vayrens fought bravely, but they had grown used to despair. When the Dravari came, they expected defeat, but the humans were different. They fought as if every battle mattered, as if every inch of ground was worth their lives. The Varans watched in awe as human squads moved with speed and precision, covering one another, never leaving anyone behind. They did not scatter when pressed. They stood together. Among the soldiers was Private Jason Carter. He was young and not as experienced as the others, but his heart was fierce. During one clash near the broken streets of the capital, Jason pulled 2 Varan children out from the path of enemy fire, shielding them with his own body. When the fight was over, he carried them to safety, earning the gratitude of their family. To the Varans, this act was more than bravery. It was proof that the humans cared for more than victory. They cared for lives. Commander Loran had once believed their fight was lost. But now, as he watched the humans prepare, he felt something he had not felt in months: hope. Standing beside Laura Mitchell, he admitted in a quiet voice, "I've seen soldiers fight before, but never like this. You do not fight for survival. You fight to win." Laura looked at him and replied, "We fight so no one else has to live in chains." The Dravari launched their next assault at dawn. Their machines thundered across the ground, towering walkers spitting fire as squads of armored troops advanced. The sky was filled with the roar of their ships. For a moment it seemed the world itself would break, but the humans did not waver. Daniel Brooks raised his rifle, gave the order, and the line erupted with fire. The battle was fierce. Human rifles cracked like thunder, and rockets streaked across the air, striking enemy machines with deadly precision. The Varan militia, inspired by their new allies, fought with renewed courage. They held the barricades, side by side with human soldiers, shouting in defiance as the Dravari pressed forward. For the first time, the Dravari advance slowed. Jason Carter fought with a squad in the eastern quarter, moving from street to street as enemy soldiers poured in. He shielded a wounded comrade, dragged him to cover, and returned fire without hesitation. His squad leader shouted for him to pull back, but Jason refused to abandon the civilians hiding nearby. His determination lit a fire in the hearts of the Varan fighters around him. In the command post, Daniel Brooks directed the battle with firm resolve. He saw every move the enemy made, anticipating their strikes, shifting his forces with speed that confused the Dravari commanders. They were used to opponents who broke under pressure, not one who turned every attack into a trap. Each time the Dravari pushed harder, they found themselves facing human soldiers who would not break. The battle raged for hours. Smoke filled the streets, buildings crumbled, and the ground was scarred with fire. But slowly, surely, the tide began to turn. The Dravari machines, once unstoppable, were now falling under the precise strikes of human weapons. Their soldiers, once feared, now struggled against fighters who refused to yield. Mara watched from the safety of a shelter with her brother Kalen. She saw human soldiers pulling wounded Varans to safety, covering them with their own bodies, and fighting as if every stranger was worth saving. Her heart, once heavy with despair, began to lift. She turned to Kalen and whispered, "Do you see them? They are not like the others. They fight for us." As the day dragged on, the Dravari fell back, leaving wreckage behind. Their commanders barked orders, but their troops no longer advanced with certainty. For the first time in months, the people of Vera saw the enemy retreat. When the last shots faded, cheers erupted across the lines. Varan militia embraced human soldiers, tears running down their faces. Some shouted in disbelief, others fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the sight of the Dravari fleeing. Hope had returned to Vera, carried on the shoulders of strangers from beyond the stars. Daniel Brooks did not allow celebration for long. He knew the Dravari would return, stronger and angrier, but he also knew something had changed. He gathered his officers and spoke with quiet strength. "They know now. They know we will not bow. And that is the first step to victory." Laura Mitchell moved among the soldiers, checking the wounded, speaking softly to those who had lost friends, reminding them that their fight had meaning. Her presence calmed the fear in many hearts. She reminded them that they were not fighting alone anymore. Commander Loran looked at her with respect. "Your people fight as if they have nothing to fear," he said. Laura smiled faintly and answered, "It is not that we have no fear. It is that we refuse to let it rule us." That night, the fires of battle still burned across the city, but for the first time, the Varans sang. It was not a song of victory, for the war was far from over. It was a song of defiance of a people who had seen the impossible happen. Children laughed again, families held each other, and soldiers who had once expected death now spoke of tomorrow. Jason Carter sat near a fire, his arm wrapped in bandages, his face streaked with dirt. A group of Veyran children sat with him, their eyes wide as he told them stories of Earth, of oceans that stretched forever, of forests older than cities, of skies filled with birds instead of fire. They listened with wonder, as if he spoke of a dream. Mara and Kalen joined the circle, sitting quietly as Jason spoke. Mara felt something stir in her chest, something she had not dared to feel in so long: hope. She looked at the young human soldier and thought, perhaps the universe had not abandoned them after all. Across the battlefield, the Dravari lords seethed in anger. They had been forced to retreat from a world they thought was already theirs. They spoke of crushing the humans, of burning them from the stars. But in their voices there was a new sound: uncertainty. For the first time they had faced a foe who did not break. The night was long, but the people of Vera did not hide in silence as they once had. They spoke of courage, of allies from the stars, of battles yet to come. And though the war was far from over, they knew one truth: the arrival of the humans had changed everything. The war did not end with one victory. The Dravari were not a people to accept defeat lightly. They returned to the skies above Vera with more ships, more soldiers, and more fury. Yet this time the people of Vera were not alone. Humanity had come, and with them came fire, steel, and the unshakable belief that no battle was ever truly lost while breath remained in their lungs. Captain Daniel Brooks led his soldiers with the calm strength of a man who knew the cost of war. He had fought on many worlds, but Vera was different. Here he saw a people broken by fear and lifted back to their feet by hope. He knew he could not let them fall again. Each morning before battle he walked among his men, speaking to them in simple words, reminding them why they fought, not for glory, not for conquest, but to protect those who could not protect themselves. Sergeant Laura Mitchell stood beside the Veran militia day after day. She trained them in the use of human weapons, taught them how to fight as units, and gave them courage with her steady presence. At first the Verans were clumsy, unused to the strange rifles and tactics, but under her guidance they grew sharper, faster, and more confident. She never raised her voice in anger, only with determination, and the militia listened because they trusted her. In her they saw someone who believed in them. Private Jason Carter became something of a symbol among the civilians. Though young, he carried himself with a kind of stubborn bravery that inspired others. Even wounded, he refused to rest. He worked to repair shelters, carried food to families, and guarded children as if they were his own siblings. The people whispered his name with gratitude, calling him the soldier who never turned away. To Jason, he was only doing what felt right, but to the Verans, he was a hero. The bond between humans and Verans grew stronger with every passing day. Where once there had been only despair, now there was trust. Soldiers shared rations with one another, traded stories, and even laughed together during rare quiet nights. The humans spoke of Earth, of blue oceans and endless forests. The Verans spoke of their lost gardens and mountains that once shone under the twin suns. Together they dreamed of a tomorrow worth fighting for, but the Dravari were determined to crush that dream. They launched a massive counterattack, striking the capital with everything they had. Their ships darkened the skies, dropping fire upon the city. Their machines stormed through the streets, their soldiers shouting in cruel voices. It was not just a battle. It was their attempt to erase hope from Vera forever. Daniel Brooks knew what was at stake. He ordered his men to stand firm, to hold the line no matter the cost. The humans moved with practiced precision, positioning their heavy weapons in the ruins, turning every street into a trap. The Verans followed their lead, standing shoulder to shoulder with their new allies. There was no talk of surrender. Not anymore. In the chaos of battle, Daniel led a strike against a key Dravari command post deep in the city. It was a dangerous mission, but it had to be done. If the Dravari controlled that post, they would direct the entire assault with deadly coordination. Daniel's squad fought through waves of enemy soldiers, moving from one shattered street to the next. Explosions tore through the air, but they pressed on. Mara and Kalen, hiding in a shelter, heard the distant thunder of that fight. Mara held her brother tightly, whispering to him that the humans would not let them fall. For once she believed her own words. Kalen asked, "Do you think they can really win?" Mara answered, "They already have. They have given us back our hope." Jason Carter fought in another part of the city, holding a barricade with a handful of Veran militia. Enemy fire rained down and shouts filled the air. Jason was hit, his shoulder burning with pain, but he refused to leave. He pulled himself to his feet, firing back with grit in his eyes. The Veyran militia saw his courage and rallied. They refused to run, not while Jason stood with them. Commander Loran fought alongside Laura Mitchell at the western wall. The Dravari brought their heaviest machines to break through, but the humans had prepared. Laura gave her orders calmly, directing fire with precision. Missiles streaked through the sky, striking the machines one by one. Loran, sword in hand, led charges with his people, his voice rising in a battle cry that carried hope through the ranks. He had once been ready to surrender, but now he fought as if the future itself depended on his sword. The Dravari pushed harder. Wave after wave, their commanders desperate to shatter the alliance between humans and Veyrans. But the defenders would not yield. Every street became a fortress, every ruin a shield. Human rifles cracked, Veyran blades cut, and together they stood against the storm. The battle lasted through the day and into the night. Fires burned across the city, lighting the dark sky with red and gold. The cries of the wounded echoed, but so did the shouts of defiance. When exhaustion threatened to break them, Laura Mitchell's voice rose above the noise. "Hope is never lost while we still fight," she cried. Her words carried from one line to another, lifting weary hearts and reminding them why they stood. Daniel Brooks and his squad finally reached the Dravari command post. The fighting there was brutal, close and bloody, but with determination and skill they broke through. Daniel himself led the charge into the heart of the post, striking down the commanders who had directed the slaughter. With their leaders gone, the Dravari lines faltered. Confusion spread through their ranks. Back at the barricades, Jason Carter leaned on his rifle, blood soaking his bandage. He looked at the militia around him and said, "We don't quit. Not today." The words were simple, but they carried weight. The militia, tired and battered, straightened their backs and fought on. They would not let him down. As the night grew darker, the Dravari realized they could not win. Their commanders were gone, their machines destroyed, their troops weary. One by one they pulled back, retreating into the shadows. The defenders of Veyra, human and Veyran alike, watched as the enemy fled. Silence fell over the city. The fires still burned and the wounded still cried out, but the Dravari were gone. For the first time in so long, the city was theirs again. The defenders looked at one another in disbelief, then in joy. Tears filled eyes and voices rose in cheers. They had survived. More than that, they had won. Mara and Kaelin emerged from their shelter, staring at the strange soldiers who had saved them. Mara whispered, "They came from the stars and they stood with us." Kaelin smiled for the first time in months, his eyes shining with wonder. "The humans," he said softly. "They are our friends." Commander Loran looked at Daniel Brooks, his face weary but his spirit alive. "Today you have given us more than victory," he said. "You have given us back our souls." Daniel simply nodded, knowing the war was not yet over, but also knowing they had taken a step that would never be forgotten. That night, humans and Veyran sat together around fires, sharing food, tending wounds, and speaking of what had happened. Bonds had been forged in fire, bonds that would not break. The people of Veyra no longer felt alone in the universe. They knew now that when the humans fought, they fought for everyone, and across the stars whispers began to spread. The Dravari had been stopped, not by a mighty empire, but by a people called human, soldiers who brought hope where none remained, and who stood unbroken against the darkness. The city still smelled of smoke. Fires burned in the ruins, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the streets. The Dravari had retreated, but no one doubted they would return. For now there was silence. It was not peace, but it was victory, and for the people of Veyra that meant everything. For the first time in many months they stood in their own streets without the shadow of chains hanging over them. Captain Daniel Brooks walked slowly through the wreckage, his eyes scanning the survivors. He saw soldiers resting against broken walls, civilians carrying water to the injured, and children clinging to their parents. He felt pride for his men and for the Veyrans who had stood beside them. But he also knew the war was not over. The Dravari had lost a battle, not the war. They would come back, and when they did, it would be with more fury than before. Sergeant Laura Mitchell organized supply lines in the city square. She directed food, water, and medicine to those who needed them most. The Veyran militia worked alongside her, their movements no longer filled with fear but with determination. Laura looked at them and saw the change in their eyes. They were no longer broken. They believed in themselves again, and that was the greatest weapon of all. Private Jason Carter sat on a bench near the medical station, his shoulder wrapped in fresh bandages. His face was pale from blood loss, but his spirit was strong. Around him, a group of Veyran children gathered, listening as he told them another story about Earth. He spoke of mountains that touched the clouds, of rivers that shone like silver in the sun, and of forests that stretched beyond sight. The children listened with wide eyes, their fears melting away as they imagined such wonders. Commander Loran approached Jason, placing a hand on his uninjured shoulder. "Your courage gave my people strength," he said. Jason shook his head and smiled faintly. "I only did what anyone should do," he answered. But Loran knew it was more than that. It was the heart of humanity itself, the refusal to abandon those in need. Mara and Kalen moved through the square, helping where they could. Mara carried water to the soldiers while Kalen handed out small pieces of bread from the supplies the humans had brought. They looked different now, their faces no longer heavy with despair. Mara's eyes carried a spark of hope, and Kalen smiled freely as he spoke with the soldiers. For the first time, they were no longer waiting for the end. They were looking toward tomorrow. As night fell, Daniel Brooks gathered with the Council of Vera. The leaders thanked him for saving their people, offering words of gratitude and promises of loyalty. Daniel listened quietly, then spoke with calm conviction. Humanity did not come for tribute or power. We came because no one should face this darkness alone. We stand with you, not above you. If you will have us, we will be your allies. The council was silent for a moment. Then the old councilwoman, the one who had once urged them to stand proud even in defeat, rose to her feet. Her voice carried across the hall. "We accept. From this day, Vera stands with humanity. Together we will fight until the Dravari are no more." Her words brought cheers and tears, for the people knew their fate had changed forever. Outside, soldiers and civilians gathered around fires, sharing food and stories. Humans and Veyrans sat side by side, no longer strangers but brothers and sisters in arms. Some laughed, some wept, and some simply sat in silence, thankful to still be alive. The night air was filled with a sense of unity, stronger than any chain the Dravari had ever forged. Laura Mitchell walked among them, stopping to speak with groups of militia, checking on the wounded, and offering comfort where it was needed. She spoke softly but with strength, reminding them that the fight ahead would not be easy. Yet every time she looked into their eyes, she saw courage staring back. The fear that had once ruled Vera was gone. Daniel Brooks stood with Commander Loran, looking at the sky where the stars shone bright. "They will return," Loran said. Daniel nodded. "Yes, but next time they will not find a broken people. They will find a world ready to fight." His words carried no arrogance, only truth. Kalen asked Mara later that night, "Do you think the humans will stay?" Mara looked at the soldiers who laughed and spoke with her people as if they had always belonged there. She smiled softly and said, "Yes, they will stay, and together we will build a future." When dawn came, the city was alive with movement. Supplies were distributed, ruins were cleared, and new defenses were built. Human engineers worked alongside Veyran builders, showing them new ways to fortify their streets. Medics treated both human and Veyran wounded without hesitation, proving that every life mattered. Jason Carter, still recovering, insisted on helping. He carried crates, guided children to safe shelters, and stood watch with the militia even when his body begged him to rest. The Veyrans admired his stubborn spirit, calling him the soldier with a heart as strong as iron. To Jason, it was simple. He could not rest while others still suffered. The Dravari were not forgotten. Scouts reported that their ships lingered at the edge of the system, watching, waiting. Everyone knew they would return. But now fear did not grip the hearts of the people. They prepared side by side with the humans, ready to face whatever came next. That night, Mara climbed the highest point of the ruins with her brother Kalen. Together, they looked at the stars. Mara whispered, "I once thought no one in the universe cared if we lived or died. But I was wrong. The humans came. They fought for us. And now we will fight with them." Kalen nodded, his young eyes filled with determination. "The Dravari will never break us again." Far beyond Vera, whispers spread through the galaxy. Tales of the battle reached other worlds. They spoke of the humans, of soldiers who fought with unshakable courage, who saved a world that was not their own, and who turned despair into hope. Empires listened with unease, and oppressed peoples listened with wonder. The name of humanity began to carry meaning across the stars. On Vera, life began again. The scars of war remained, but so did the promise of a brighter future. Where once there had been only silence and fear, now there was laughter and determination. The humans had come when all hope was lost and everything had changed. Daniel Brooks stood once more at the edge of the ruined wall, the same place where he had first looked upon the battlefield. This time he did not see only destruction. He saw a city rising again, a people standing tall and a bond that would not be broken. He knew the war was far from over, but he also knew something greater had begun. Humanity and Vera were now bound together, not by chains, but by choice. And as long as they stood side by side, there was nothing the Dravari could do to break them. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to claim. And in that truth lay the greatest victory of all.